Buffing marches have been a bit of a relic in Rise of Kingdoms over the last few years. We've gotten so much high DPS. We've got so many crazy commanders that we're going to put out there and run loads of damage. So the days of running like Trajan and Joan and Trajan and Mulan and some of those situations, they're long gone. Okay. But with the addition, of our boy Vercingetorix, and since we've got Philip and we've got other buffing marches like Joan and Shajar, is the buffing march back? Stick around, because we went through all kinds of testing to show you what happens when you go all in on a buffing march right now. Hey, yo, it's your boy War Daddy Chansky. I put out videos for Rise of Kingdoms all the time. And if you guys enjoy these videos, throw a like on here. Help us out. Helps out the video, helps out the channel. If you're not subscribed, consider doing so. Hit that subscribe button, and you can hit that bell if you want to get any alerts when I put out a content like this. Well, this is going to be really, really comprehensive. Okay, now this is a video about buffing marches. Is it back? Can we run these things again? Well, we did all the crazy testing. We used Vercingetorix, we used Philip, we used all this stuff. Now, to give you some history, back in the day, Trajan came into the game, and the reason why he was so powerful or just so useful is because he did this buff of 30% more skill damage, all right, for 3 seconds to 5 nearby allied or friendly troops. That's back in the day when everybody did skill damage. Like, there was no smite and combo. And people ran Trajan in the field for a while. The top OL teams ran Trajan all the time. They ran Ethel Trajans in mid-fights in OL. Okay, and we ran Trajan a lot. Now, today, he's just used for Canyon, right? You're only going to see him in Canyon, and it's partly because he's got a crazy rage buff that he gives with that 5-target buff, all right? And so people stopped using this, and we would use him with Joan, or I'm sorry, we would use him with Mulan. Mulan's got a crazy buff as well. Some people would even use him with Joan, or even use him with Ethel, and just run a full leadership march with Trajan and Ethel, where Trajan does the buffing, and then Ethel does the debuffing. Okay, and so what happened was, over time, that march just started getting crushed. Like, people would always say, the Trajan march is a hospital bill. It's not going to trade well. Okay, he's so tanky, but he's just sending so many troops to the hospital, especially since he runs a march or a troop cap up to where he has more troops to run, and it didn't end up being very good. I mean, obviously Trajan was cast aside. People stopped running him in the field, and then they started giving us commanders like Philip. This is where it started to change a little bit, because Philip was the first commander we got that was a buffing commander, right? He's got a crazy good buff. Now, it's only 2 seconds. It's crazy good, but he's got an expertise that allows you a 60% chance to fire off either his skill or the commander he's with. You can fire that off again, so we like instant procs. But what happened with Philip was that there was so much damage bonus with Philip that we absolutely loved, and I mean loved, running Philip, because he could actually trade well. It was the first time in a long time that we had gotten a buffing commander that you could pair with the likes of Arthur, and you could pair with the likes of BQ and Luce, and you could actually trade good, trade positive. And it was actually pretty good when you ran it, and people are still running it today. People are literally still running Arthur with Philip today. Okay. And so from there, you're sitting there saying, okay, well, we've got a leadership commander now that does buffing, but he's strong enough to help you trade okay. So Philip has lasted pretty good since he's been out. Then they gave us a commander in leadership that did no buffing. However, he was so versatile, and this is Hector. He's so versatile that he actually gives you a stopgap DPS commander. What I mean by that, stopgap basically means that you can put him with Arthur and he's a good combo commander. You can put him with BQ, he's a good smite commander. You can even put him with archer commanders, and he's an okay archer commander because he does skill damage, right? He does a lot of damage. Now, this is all single target, so it's not going to last a super long time, but he enhances different things based on how he's set up as an infantry, cavalry, or archer commander. He sets behind what whatever commander you've got. So he's not a buffing commander. He's more of just a DPS commander that's leadership, that's extremely versatile. And then, of course, in the meta right now, he is part of the cavalry meta with David on the garrison. He's part of the archer meta with Hayam on the garrison, and he's part of the infantry meta with Gorgo on the garrison. And he allows you to run mixed troops. So very versatile commander, but not a buffing commander. Well, now we've got this guy. And homeboy down here, Vercingetorix, is a different kind of commander than Philip, but he is a buffing commander. However, he's adding shielding. So he's completely different from Philip and Hector in the sense that Philip focuses more on just pure all damage and buffing. Hector focuses more on DPS damage with smite combo and skill with no buffing. And then Vercingetorix does buffing, but he's a shield commander, which is going to give a 2,500 shield, a mighty shield, and then he's going to buff your other marches, and then he's a debuffer. So he kind of does everything. He just doesn't do straight DPS. Okay, he debuffing 5 targets with 40% march speed is fantastic for the field. We all know this. And so we think Vercingetorix, who's going to come out in the game this weekend, we think he's going to be pretty good to put with some commanders like Arthur and some other ones and maybe give you an upgrade from Hector. Okay, super healthy. And I say super healthy. He's got just a lot of health, and he's got a bunch of march speed, and then he's a rage engine. This guy is a flat-out rage engine, does a ton of rage, mitigates rage, does all that stuff. He gives you a unit cap bonus, which is good, and then there's that all damage bonus when you run 2 different troop types. But we're probably going to run him with 1 troop type, and he does damage mitigation. Okay, so from there, just very tanky. He's a little bit different from Philip. He goes by way of damage. Philip does more damage. Versi takes less damage. And so definitely tankier with the shielding effect and all that stuff. So here's my point. Okay, we wanted to find out with the new, I'm not going to say advent, but the new attention that's being put on Echelon right now. And we're using the Civilized special inscription, okay? This is a really, really good situation to where anytime you're buffing or you're giving extra rage or you're healing, all the commanders you do that with, all the marches you're doing that for, get 25 rage. Okay, I'll have a card in the top and I'll have it at the end screen where I talked about how Echelon Civilized is just like crazy good. It's worth like 2 drums. It's wild how this works if you put it on buffing commanders, right? And then that's enhanced by Influential, because Influential doesn't look great off the rip. It does have a 5% rage gain speed boost, which is awesome, but it's this right here. It gives you a buff, which feeds into this right here. So you're able to trigger Civilized so many times. And we ran this with Philip. We ran this with Vercingetorix. We actually tested this out like crazy. Okay. And so in that video I have about Civilized, it's just wild. It's wild what this thing does. So from there, we wanted to set this thing up. So what I did was a 5 march test. Okay. I did a 5 march test and I ran it in the simulator, and that's Specco Simulator. I'll have a link down in the description on how you can get that. And the simulator's not like perfect, but at least gives us an idea. So I ran these 5 marches right here. Okay, and I wanted to see a couple of things. I wanted to see collectively what was the total damage on a punching bag, and then how were the rage cycles compared to buffing marches. So I used these 5, and then what I did was I switched out Arthur and Hector, and I put in Vercingetorix. I put in Vercingetorix with Shajar. Okay, Shajar's got healing. Shajar's got normal damage buffs. Now it's only to 3 targets. And then I put it with Philip. And then I put it with Joan. And oh boy, let me show you guys how this thing looks. So you understand, this is how I set up the simulator, right? We're going to hit a punching bag. You can see that guy up there in the middle. He's just a punching bag. And then I had those 5 marches. I put gear on them. I put inscriptions on them. I did all that stuff. I'm only running 1 set of drums on the actual tank march, which is on here. It's showing Vercingetorix with Joan. Okay. And then I switched that out. Like I started Arthur with Hector there as the tank march. And then I went to Versi and Shajar, then Vercingetorix and Philip, and then Vercingetorix and Joan. And I just tested them all out. Okay. And this is what I found. I'm going to pull this thing up here. I'm going to zoom in. We're going to go to the first test. All right. The first test you can see here is I'm running Chen Zhuge, Sun Tzu Wallace, BQ Luce, Gang Gang, and Achilles. Now, I ran this thing 4 times. All right. And I got the damage. You can see the average rate cycle 1. That's of the first test we did. Chen and Zhuge, if it's not being the tank march and it's not hitting AoE, it's going to do 8-second skill cycles every single time. This is a 5-minute thumping on the dummy text, or the punching bag, if you will. So for 5 minutes, this thing runs nonstop, and we just want to get an idea. It kind of simulates a little bit of field, but not crazy. Back and forth fighting changes things a little bit, obviously. But Chen Zhuge is always going to be at 8 seconds. Okay, it's not hitting any other AoE. It's not doing more rage consumption with Chen. So we're just going to leave that there. Then Sun Tzu and Wallace, you can see when I'm running this, and I'm running this with Arthur and Hector as kind of the tank march. Sun Tzu Wallace does 6.8 seconds on his average active skill. BQ Luce 7.3, Gang Gang Achilles 6.9, and then Arthur Hector 6.9. Now, part of the reason why Arthur Hector is higher, because it's kind of got a slow rage engine, is because it's the one being hit. It's the tank march, right? So I ran these in cycle 1, cycle 2, cycle 3, cycle 4. And at the end of it on the right, you're going to see the average cycle of all the marches. Okay, this is the numbers we want over here on the right. 7.16 average cycle, considering all the marches for all the tests. Okay, then the average damage is really pretty high, 30,995,000. That's what we've got for the average damage. Okay, so we can see that the damage is high. The average cycles are pretty good. Nothing crazy, but they're pretty good. And that's what we saw in the first test. Then I changed it up and I ran Vercingetorix with Shajar. And part of the reason why is because Shajar does healing to 3 allied marches. And then if those marches get the healing, she's going to give a buff. So she's kind of got basically it's a double dip on the Civilized with Rage, because when I changed the setup, all right, when I changed the setup in this, I went with Arthur and Hector, right? And that ran with Delta. And then when I moved to Vercingetorix, I put it in the test with Echelon. And with Echelon, we ran the Civilized and Influential just to see. We wanted to see what kind of difference we got when it came to how fast all the marches cycle rage. Okay. And so from there, that's what we wanted to do. First test with Versi, I did with Shajar. Okay. And here's what we found. This is in test number 2. You can see here, same tests, but at the bottom there, you got Versi Shajar. Okay, now that a rage cycle that it goes through, or the skill cycle average it goes through, is 6.3. Like Versi is a crazy rage engine. All right, now you go to average cycle 2 on the second test, third test, fourth test, and then look at the right. And now look at the right compared to the one on the left. The average cycle of all your marches goes down. And that's because now we're using Civilized and Influential, and we're using buffing marches with Echelon. Okay. But overall, the damage is nowhere as high. And part of the reason why, if you look at Versi and Shajar, it's not going to kick out hardly any damage. Hardly any damage at all. Okay. And so from there, that's how this thing comes to play. You can see 1.8 million here, 1.8 million here. But if you look up here on the average cycle, the average damage, 28,922,000 versus 30,935,000. Okay. And so from there, that's what we did in our second test. And then in our third test, we ran it with Philip. Oh boy, here we go. Okay. So with Philip, same kind of damage results, 1.7 million. And then on the second cycle, 1.865 million. And third cycle, 1.904 million. Fourth cycle, 1.902 million. So the damage Versi and Philip does nowhere near what the other marches are going to do, and nowhere near what Arthur and Hector did in the first test. Okay. However, look at the rage cycles. Okay. So in the first rage cycle at the top, 7.16 was the average rage cycle for all your marches. Okay. For all the tests, that was your average. In test 2, it was 7.03. So the rage cycle's coming down. With Philip, it's 6.19. Okay. So you're firing off everybody faster. And part of the reason why is because Philip now is not only doing his 5 target AoE buff, but he's also doing and helping the Civilized with his instant proc expertise. Okay. And we talk about it all the time. Part of the reason why Philip is so good is because he's got an expertise that does instant procs. Okay. And basically what it does is 40% of the time, he's got a chance to fire off his active skill a second time. Okay. There's a 20% chance that the commander he's with, the other commander's got a 20% chance. So a 60% chance to fire off more often. So you're just firing off the Civilized Echelon special inscription more often. Okay, so that average rage cycle comes down to 6.9. But the average damage still isn't anywhere close to the 30,995 or 935,000 that the first test did. Okay, so you're giving up more damage. You're not doing as much damage, obviously, and your rage cycle is going 6.19, okay? And then I thought to myself, okay, if that's the case, I'm going to try him with Luce. Luce actually was worse on the average rage cycle and the average damage, okay? And we're going to have to test that out in the field and figure it out. But then I ran him down here in the bottom right on the 4th test with Joan. Holy jeez, look what this does. Okay, first of all, look at the average cycles between Versi and Joan and Versi and Philip. Okay, you got 6.2, 6.2, 6.1, 6.1 with Versi and Philip on your average skill cycles. With Joan, look at this: 5.8, 5.9, 5.8, and 5.9. It goes so fast. It fires off so freaking fast. Okay, and not only does it fire off so fast, your average rage cycle of everybody comes way down. Sun Tzu Wallace, 6.6, 6.5, 6.6, 6.5. BQ Luce. And part of the reason why with Joan, okay, now this is Joan Prime. Part of the reason why with Joan is that she fires off her instant proc every other skill cycle, all right? And what I mean by that is that her 4th skill, you have a 100% chance to fire off the Sacred Banner. The Sacred Banner is her main active skill. But part of why this thing works so well is because you're going to give rage to 3 nearby allied or friendly troops, including your own. So 2 other troops you're going to give rage to, and you're going to give a damage buff to. All right? And this lasts for 3 seconds. So it's like just a ton of rage. Tons of rage. And then you pair that with Vercingetorix, and then you pair that with Echelon, and it's like wild. Now, I'm not telling everybody to go out and get Echelon and Civilized and go run like a cav set of Echelon, but it just gives you an idea of what this thing does. Okay, so when you have Joan running this, it's like, holy geez, you're doing so much buffing, and it's enhancing that Civilized proc so much. And then what happens is that the Versi Joan actually does more damage. It actually does a good bit of damage. And so the average damage in the bottom right, or on the right side there, 30,573,000 compared to 30,935,000 with the Arthur Hector. Okay, but you see that average rate or average skill cycle is 7.16 seconds for all 5 marches. Over here, 6.72 seconds. Everybody is firing off faster, and so I don't know. Is this the return of the buffing march? I don't know if people are going to run our boy Versi with nothing but other buffing march. I mean, are we just going to run straight buffing marches with Versi and Philip? Is that what we're going to do? Or are we going to run straight buffing marches with Versi and Shajar? At least it gives you an option. And that if you run it with Joan, like you can run it with Civilized. Like we know that like the Philip Joan does pretty well when it comes to that. And Versi's just got a crazy rage engine that just gets enhanced by Joan. I mean, from that standpoint, is it time to bring back the buffing march? Is it time to look at this overall and say to ourselves, okay, we are back to the buffing marches. We're back to the days of Trajan. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case, but it gives us something to think about. Okay, if you're running 5, 6, 7 marches, we did it forever, guys. We ran Trajan. We ran Ethel and Trajan. We ran Trajan and Mulan. Like, that's what we ran. So do we go back to that? Do we go back to running just straight buffing marches? Are they making the buffing too powerful with Echelon and the commanders are giving us, we'll test all of this, and I can't wait. I got both my accounts going into KVK. My second account's going into a massive KVK. My main's going into KVK and Orleans. So we can test all this different stuff out. And I've got it on both accounts. And I'll run this thing like crazy. And so we'll figure out collectively if it's better for your marches, your other marches, to run a buffing march, to put Echelon Civilized on it. Like, why not? And so from there, if you guys enjoyed this video, throw a like on here. Consider subscribing. Helps us out a lot. I want to get your comments down in the comment section. Let me know what you think, and we can go through all of this. So with all that being said, love you guys. Appreciate you guys. And we hope you have a great day, broskies.